Thank you so much for utilizing this pre-recorded resource with an overview of the ESSA Consolidated Federal and Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet, Post-Award Highlights. My name is Laura Wake, and I am the Post-Award Compliance Unit Manager within the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division. So I wanted to share with you today some newly added aspects to our post-award review of the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application and the new requirement of the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet submission that will go along with that post-award review. Before we dive in, I do need to share with you two different disclaimers. The first one is our legal disclaimer, which essentially states that we are operating on our most current understanding in terms of the content contained within this presentation, and it does not constitute legal advice. If you need legal advice, you'd want to seek legal counsel. And also that the content that we're sharing with you today is subject to change. Our newly added disclaimer here is in alignment with the times, which it deals with recording and AI, so artificial intelligence. So the Texas Education Agency does not permit third-party recording or the use of artificial intelligence, AI, summary services during its grants-related trainings. Attendees of TEA's grants-related trainings may not use AI services, language models, applications, interfaces, or assistance to attend, review, or record the trainings. TEA further prohibits any person or entity from using the information included in its grants-related trainings to train AI technologies. Any attendees of TEA's grant-related trainings who violate this prohibition may be removed from the trainings and may be barred from attending future grants-related trainings. For our agenda, in terms of this being a recorded version, we are going to jump to the second bullet, which is the post-award compliance reviews and the newly added requirement, which I hinted at earlier. We'll be going over the process of the post-award compliance unit and the time frame with these reviews. We will be looking at the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application, the relevant programmatic schedules and budgetary schedules, and the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent options. So I'm going to offer 3 different options for the actual documentation that will be submitted to us. And then the final portion will be the bringing it all together, which is looking at where's the alignment that we're looking at for between the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application and the submission of that Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent. So you have multiple options for how it's actually submitted as well. So it's always important to understand the statutory aspects of these requirements. So to give you a little bit of background on that, we are going to be looking at the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA statute. So as a part of utilizing the Title I Part A funds, there is a required homeless reservation. And this is grounded in statute, which is nothing new, but this outlines essentially what the statute is communicating, which it requires a school system to reserve Title I Part A funds To provide services comparable to those provided to children in Title I Part A schools to homeless children and youth in Title I Part A and non-Title I Part A schools, which may be determined based on a needs assessment, and to children in local institutions for neglected children. The ESEA requires a school system to determine the amount of these reservations based on its total Title I Part A allocation prior to any allowable expenditures or transfer of funds. So with this requirement and this newly added aspect of our reviews, we're looking at delving into monitoring this more closely. So when we're looking at that ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application, there's a specific schedule on that application called the PS 3101, which is the Title I Part A schedule. And one section on that schedule, Part C, which we'll get to, it is the reservation of funds. And given that the homeless reservation is required, it is an aspect of that schedule. So we'll be reviewing that schedule against the submission of the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent. So the why behind this new submission requirement in combination with this post-award review of the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application has to do with USDE's monitoring visit, which took place. And as a part of that monitoring, this was the feedback that we got, that we need to monitor and review the Title I Part A application to verify the sufficiency of the set-aside amount to ensure that school systems have met the requirements of ESEA Section 113C3A to reserve such funds as necessary to provide services to children and youth experiencing homelessness that are comparable to other children receiving funded Title I Part A services. In response, school systems will be required to submit the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent, as I have mentioned, and this will be in combination with our post-award application review process. So the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application Review Process and Timeline. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the Post-Award Compliance Unit, what we're looking at when we're reviewing the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application, this newly integrated aspect of it, and then the timeline for when this occurs. So as the name of our unit implies, post-award compliance, we look at federal grant applications post-award. So after the grant application has been no good. So we are looking at grant applications for issues of compliance or non-compliance with applicable statutes, regulations, non-regulatory guidance, and grant guidelines. In this case, with the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application, there is a random 25% sample of school systems that's generated. And those will be the school systems that we will review their ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application post-award. And that 25%, we will request from them that they submit the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent so that we can make those comparisons and draw alignment between what's being indicated on the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application and what's being indicated in that worksheet submission. The timeline for these reviews, we don't start looking at the federal grant applications until they've been no good. So we look at them post-award, And so that time frame will be different for each school system depending upon when they submit their application and then when it's gone through the process with grants administration to where the NOGA's been awarded. We track that. So we'll know when the NOGA's been awarded. We'll go in, we'll review the application if the school system is within that 25% random sample. We will request the submission of the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent. And the review process from start to finish, our deadline for completing the whole process is the deadline for amendment submission for the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Program. Again, the newly added requirement as a part of our post-award application review of the ESSA Consolidated Federal, if a school system is randomly selected for review, they will be required to submit the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent, and then we'll be reviewing that against the application. If there is a misalignment, if there is an issue of noncompliance, then we reach out to the school system directly, either request an amendment and or request a resubmission of the relevant worksheet. The type of communication you can expect to see from us if you're a part of that 25% sample, if there's an issue of noncompliance, we send out a preliminary report. And that essentially outlines the issues of noncompliance, and it also incorporates supportive resources for school systems so that they can work through that issue of noncompliance with the resources. And also we are always available for a phone call or a Zoom meeting to support school systems as they work through the process. If we review the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application and the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet that's been submitted, and there are no issues whatsoever, we go directly to issuing a final report, and it outlines the date in which the application and submission were reviewed. It outlines the specific application, which in this case would be the ESSA Consolidated, and then it just states that there were no issues of noncompliance that we identified. If a preliminary report was sent and an amendment or resubmission was required, then we review all of that and we send out a final report, which is after the fact, after reviewing that resubmission or amendment. And it's a summary essentially of what initially was identified and whether it was resolved or not. This communication is all shared via email, but also we utilize the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division WorkApp to communicate with the field. You'll be able to see with your dynamic view in that WorkApp all the stages of our review, any documentation associated with it will be housed there. And also we'll get to a little bit later how you can actually submit your Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent through that platform. So ESSA Consolidated Federal, we're going to be looking at briefly the relevant programmatic and budgetary schedules related to Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet submission. So we touched on this earlier, but I did not have a visual of the schedule itself when I spoke to it earlier. So this is the PS 3101 Title I Part A schedule on the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application, and you can see highlighted there in Part C, activities to be conducted with reserved funds. As I mentioned earlier, the services to homeless students is a required reservation, and it is based upon a needs assessment that is conducted at the local level by the school systems. And the reserved amount here, we will be comparing that total reserved amount against what's being indicated on the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent that is submitted to us. So that is one aspect of where we're looking for that alignment. We're looking for what's indicated here on this schedule and then what is reflected in the documentation that was submitted to us. If there's some sort of misalignment there, this would be where either the application would need to be amended or there would need to be a resubmission of documentation, depending upon what the situation is. The relevant budgetary schedules that we'll be drawing the comparison with between the document submission and the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application. We'll be looking at 6,100, which is payroll costs, 6,200, which is professional and contracted services. We'll be looking at 6,300, which is supplies and materials, and 6,400, which is other operating costs. So I mentioned earlier that there are a few options for what the submission can look like. So we are going to go through those options now of the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent. There are 3 different options for that submission to us. Now, it's important to make this distinction here, which for the purpose of our review, our post-award application review in combination with the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation documentation submission, we are really honing in on the itemization of those funds, of the funds that have been reserved. We're looking very closely at that against the budgetary schedules on the application, and we're looking at that total amount reserved against the PS 3101 and what was indicated there. So that's our focus, but school systems are required to determine that amount to be reserved for services to children experiencing homelessness based upon a needs assessment. And I spoke to that earlier. That is a requirement. It is in statute that school systems, that this reservation is based upon that needs assessment. We are not analyzing that needs assessment for the purpose of our review, but it is important that that takes place as a part of determining the reservation amount. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 options, so let's get to that. One option is the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Itemization Smartsheet form. Some of you are probably well versed with utilizing Smartsheet forms, and some of you may never have used one before. So we will be walking through that together. I will actually go to the live version of the form to show you how to fill it out. But first we'll walk through this part of it. So option 1 is the Smartsheet form. On the form, there are all the relevant class object codes that I spoke to earlier, and all the lists of services that are allowable for the use of these funds. There's also an other field, and I'll show you that in a moment. So if there is a service that you're wanting to utilize the funds for that is an allowable use of funds, and perhaps that service is not listed, you do have the option of entering that service and explaining and describing the service. There is what is called logic linked up and organized on the form. So any class object code and service that you choose, it will then present you the correct field to enter in your estimated amount for that service within that class object code. This is what the form looks like. So basically the form that, as I was on the previous slide, there's a link. There's no access to Smartsheet required. It's just a link that you click on, and then this form presents itself and you work through the form. You'll utilize the drop-down menu to select school system and CDN number. There's also another field that is not visible here that is the region number, and that's also a drop-down. For each one of the class object codes listed here, there is a list of services that align with that class object code that you can choose from, and you can select multiple services within each class object code. And the corresponding estimated amount field will populate for you. So you only see what you need to see based upon your choices. And you always want to remember at the end of this to check the box next to send me a copy of my responses, and it will directly email you a copy of your responses. The really other excellent thing about this submission option is that it automatically populates to a Smartsheet, and it's already submitted to us, so we can see it immediately. So this is not only a form option, but it is also a submission option to where you are doing both things at one time. On the back end of this, on the Smartsheet itself, there is a formula where it is totaling the amount of funds that are being reserved. So that also is reported to us via this route. I am going to backtrack here, and I'm going to go into a live view of this form and show you how to complete it. Okay. So here we have, as I mentioned earlier, subrecipient name. We have sort of a test account that we set up so that we can make sure these technological tools are working properly. So I'm going to select that made up account, and then the made up region. We do not have region 21. And then here, when I click on this, there are two options here for services under the payroll costs. So there's the homeless liaison, and there's other salary. As I mentioned earlier, every single one of these class object codes has an other option, and you just need to define and justify it. So I'm going to click on the liaison, and then you can see here that it opens up a corresponding estimated amount salary for homeless liaison. You would need to, this is populating it for me. It has a memory of what I've done before when I was testing this out, but you would just simply enter in the amount here and then move on to the next relevant class object code. Now you may not have services in all these class object codes, but you see here you can select more than one at a time, and when you do that, it's going to open up the corresponding estimated amount. So I'm going to put 200 there, I'll put 250 there, and then we'll go on to supplies and materials, and you can see it all listed here, your choices. And then we'll put an estimated amount here. And then other operating costs, I'm going to choose food. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very, very important that you click right here, because that's going to send you a outline of what you entered into the form via an email. And again, the totaling of the service, the amount of the reservation is happening on the Smartsheet on the back end of this right now. So once I click submit here, this goes automatically to the Smartsheet, and the post-award compliance unit is able to view it. And so it's an excellent option as a document submission, but also just how to submit it as well. It's very seamless. So I'm going to go ahead and submit, and this is the message it will give you once you submit. So that's option one for submitting. So I'm going to take us back to the presentation, and I'm going to show you the next option. Next option for submitting, get to that spot, is right here. Okay, so The Federal Program Compliance Division created a Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet. And this is a visual of the first page of that worksheet. It is guidance. So in the live version of this, which I'll show you in a moment, this details guidance on this homeless reservation. And towards the bottom of this, which you cannot see, there are links to resources as well. There's the needs assessment portion of the worksheet, again, reiterating that it is critical that the school system has conducted a needs assessment. But this is not, for the purpose of our review, we won't be analyzing this aspect of the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet that the Federal Program Compliance Division created. But it is important, if you go this route and you're going to use their worksheet, that you do complete this portion of it. This is the final page, and the post-award compliance unit, this is what we'll really delve into, is we'll be looking at the class object code, where the estimated amounts are placed and for what activities and services. And we'll be looking at the total amount of the reservation, which on the actual form is calculating towards the bottom of the form. So if you choose to utilize this worksheet, I'll go over later on different options for how you would submit it. But this is another option for you. It is an Excel file, and I will show you where to locate it on the Federal Program Compliance webpage. So let's go there now. Okay, I'm going to take you into that view. So your starting point for that is the TEA webpage. And then as you hover over Finance and Grants, you will see Federal Program Compliance. I'm going to click on that. And then the next step you want to take is to click on Title I Part A, Improving Basic Programs. And then you're going to scroll down, and it's right here, guidance and worksheet to determine amount of Title I Part A homeless reservation. So when you click on that, it downloads an Excel file. You'll see here, this is the guidance tab that I mentioned earlier. And then here are the links to resources. This is the needs assessment portion. And then this is the itemized reservation portion. Now, I do want to draw the alignment here with that Smartsheet form that I showed you as option 1. It is exactly the same choices via that form in terms of the activities and strategies and class object codes as what's represented here. You see down at the bottom, this is where it will give you that total amount. So that's where you locate that worksheet. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, I'm going to just get to option 3. Now, option 3 is if you have at the local level, perhaps you have a system or a document that you're using already to determine the Title I Part A homeless reservation. And that's excellent. You can use that as well, and you can submit that to us. You'll just want to make sure, if you go that route, if you're using your local version, that it must indicate the class object codes being utilized. It must indicate the activity and strategies specific to each class object code. It must include estimated amount of funds per activity and strategy, and it must include the total estimated amount across all those class object codes. So basically you want to kind of mirror what that federal program compliance worksheet, the data that's on there, you want to mirror that on your local version. The other aspect that you'll want to make sure and include is you absolutely want to have your school system name and the county district number represented on that document, and it can be in Excel or PDF file formats. Those are both acceptable. So we reviewed your three options for, what that document submission can actually look like. Now let's look again at, what are we actually, when we have these pieces of information, we have the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application, we have your document submission. And again, this is the next step where we're saying, okay, what is present or what's been indicated on the PS 3101, Section C, Line 2, Services to Homeless Students. What's the amount of the reserve funds there? And then we'll be looking at, okay, this document was submitted. What's the total reserve funds on this document? And again, that's where if there's a misalignment there, that would require an amendment of the application so that the PS 3101 can be revised, or it may be an issue where the documentation submitted was inaccurate. And so we would just work on that with you to determine which route we need to take to resolve the issue. And again, these are the class object codes that are the determined recommended class object codes. So that would be 6100, which again is the payroll cost, 6200, which is the professional and contracted services, 6300, which is supplies and materials, and 6400, which is other operating costs. And we're just looking for the alignment between all the information on the document that's submitted and what's indicated on the budgetary schedules on the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application. Okay, so we talked about, your options in terms of the document. We talked about what we're actually reviewing. Now, these are your options for how you send it to us. So there are three different options for how you can submit your documentation. Option one is to complete that Smartsheet form. And so that form, again, is an option in terms of the document, right? The information, the data. And it's also an option for the submission. So if you go that route, if you choose the Smartsheet form, you've already submitted it to us. So that is option one. Option two, the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet or equivalent. So say, for example, you use the Federal Program Compliances worksheet, or you use a local version that's an equivalent. You can upload that document to the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division WorkApp, and I will show you what that looks like in a moment. But that's another option for submission. When you upload it to the WorkApp, you'll have a dynamic view specific to the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application Reviews. And you'll be able to upload your document directly to your row on that Smartsheet. The dynamic view that's created from the Smartsheet is linked through your email address. So you are the only one that can see your information, and the dynamic view will have your school system's name in a row. You click on that row and it allows you to upload documentation. And again, I'll show you a visual of that in a moment. But that is another option that's excellent. We receive the documentation immediately. We're notified that it's there, and it's already linked up through our whole WorkApp system. Option three, which is also absolutely fine option is to just email it to us. So say, for example, that you're wanting to use the federal program compliance's homeless reservation worksheet or your equivalent of that. And so you're working with Excel or PDF document and you just want to email it. So you can do that. You can email it to us at pac@tea.texas.gov. So again, this is just to show that, this form link, not only you're entering your data there, but then we're automatically receiving it. This is option 2, which is uploading it to the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division WorkApp if you're choosing to go with an Excel or PDF of the Federal Program Compliance Division version or your equivalent. So some of you probably already have access to TEA's WorkApp system. And if that's the case, then you have access to our Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division WorkApp. And this is what it looks like. So you just go into the system, you click on this, and then it will give you a menu of all your dynamic views that are available, which we'll look at a dynamic view example in a moment. If you don't have access to the WorkApp yet, then in this presentation, there are steps and instructions for how to gain that access. So if you're interested in this type of submission, this is what the dynamic view looks like for the school systems for the post-award reviews. It gives the ESC, the CDN number, the subrecipient name, which would of course be your school system name, the grant application being reviewed. In this case, it would be, you would see ESSA Consolidated Federal. It would show you the status and relevant dates and if an amendment's required and what the issue may be and if it was corrected or not. But in your dynamic view, when you click on this row where your subrecipient name is, it opens up this window, which is the details pane. There's a data tab and an attachments tab. In this scenario, you are clicking on the attachments tab, and then it gives you this little button and it says attach a file. So you click on that and then it'll allow you to search your computer for the file that you want to upload. You upload it and we immediately are notified that it's there and it's in our system. So that's option number 2 for a possible submission of the documentation. These are the steps for how to gain access. You can click on the Edgar Connect WorkApp or this link and they take you to the same place, which is this next slide. If you'll want to start out by checking around your school district to see whom already has access to the WorkApp system. And if there's someone that you work with that already has the access, then they'll want to go into the system and add you in there as a new user. If you don't know anyone in your district that already has access, then you would reach out to Frank Baca and request some assistance with that. And I will show you his contact information in a moment. This is what the new user certification looks like. It's basically an online form that you would fill out, and it's for security reasons. It asks you a variety of questions related to your access to the Smartsheet systems. If you follow all these steps, you know someone that has access, you've gone through them and you're still having issues, or if you don't have even a starting point with someone in your school district, then you can email Frank Baca and he's extremely helpful. Frank Baca at tea.texas.gov. And he is a system automation team lead and he'll be able to assist you with gaining access to the WorkApp system. And then our third option for submission is good old-fashioned email. You can attach your document to your email and email us that documentation at pac@tea.texas.gov. Okay, so those were the three options for submission. You have the Smartsheet form. You could submit it to us that way. You have the WorkApp option if you want to go into your dynamic view and upload a file, and then you could just simply email it to us. Now we are on to some valuable resources that we pulled. There's the Every Student Succeeds Act, the statute related to ESSA. There's the Title I Part A Improving Basic Programs Guide. That webpage I took you to earlier, the Federal Program Compliance Title I Part A webpage, there's just a wonderful collection of resources on there, so I highly recommend. It's a lot to look through, but there's some really valuable information there. There's the Title I Part A Frequently Asked Questions. There's the Education for Homeless Children and Youth's Program Non-Regulatory Guidance. There's the PS 3101. There's a place on when you're in the eGrant system and you're on that schedule, there's a button where you can actually download the instructions for any schedule that you're looking at. And so this is a link to those schedule instructions. And then you have the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Worksheet that we went over that was created by the Federal Program Compliance. And then there's the option for the Title I Part A Homeless Reservation Itemization Form through the Smartsheet avenue. If you have any questions or concerns or feedback, or you need assistance with walking through the process, please reach out to us. We are wanting to help. We are here for you. You can email us directly at pac@tea.texas.gov. You can also reach out to me directly. Again, my name's Laura Wake, and I am the Post-Award Compliance Unit Manager. My email is laura.wake@tea.texas.gov.